Okay, hello all. Welcome to the W3C community group call for the 24th of November, 2021. The topic for the call today is going to be requirements for the membership proposal with regard to minors and dependent accounts. So I think this is going to be an important one to get the requirements right. There are presumably some legal and safeguarding concerns, as well as the regular technical kind of approach that we need to take. But before we launch into that, I'm just going to go around my screen and ask people to introduce themselves for the sake of the recording of the call. So first of all, Stephen, can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. Stephen Winfield, GLO.
Thank you. Andrew Marshall.
Andrew Marshall, Principal Architect at Gladstone.
Thank you, Andrew. Donald Smith.
Donald Smith, Head of IT at We Play Football.
Thank you, Donald. Rob Redpath.
Redpath at Open Data Services Cooperative.
Thank you. Jason Sorrell.
Jason Sorrell, Playways.
Thank you. Andy Gordon.
Andy Gordon from Gladstone, Senior Product Owner.
Thank you, Andy. Nish.
Hi, Nish Desai here from IMIN, representing Manchester projects, though I think Anne-Marie's here as well, and Westminster.
Thank you. And I'll jump over to Anne-Marie now.
Hi, Anne-Marie Eric, Digital Lead for MCR Active, and obviously working alongside IMIN on our current digital project.
Nick.
Hello, Nick from IMIN, involved
Thank
in
you.
OpenActive standard stuff.
Thank you, Nick. And I'm Tim Hill with the Open Data Institute. Thank you for your note, Donald. I'll try not to be keep calling on you in your noisy environment. So this is going to be quite a free-form call, actually. I'll share the screen for what it's worth. However, the agenda consists basically of minors and dependent accounts. How are we dealing with that? Because it crops up at various points in the membership proposal itself. And in the last technical working group call, we got pretty quickly mired in terms of what the requirements actually are. So I think it would be useful, actually, I'd previously mentioned Nish for this, but Anne-Marie, would it be possible for you just to take us quickly through how this is working with MCR Active?
Put on the spot.
You showed up.
I was like, I'll drop into this call and listen. For ourselves, the way we've created it is that we obviously refer to them as family accounts, but I think across the sector seems to be this primary account holder with dependents is a terminology that seems to be widely accepted. So I'll try and stick to that. So the way we have set it up is you can register obviously as an individual or as a family stroke primary and dependents account. We capture the leads account details first. You can add additional adults to that family account, and the way that that's done is the primary account holder will enter that other adults' details, and they will be sent an email request asking them to confirm, update any details required, and that will then add them to that account so that they both have access to it. But they wouldn't just be added obviously automatically. The other adults has to give that confirmation and set their own communication preferences and agree to the different like privacy notices and stuff. So you can choose adults, and then you can choose how many children, so I suppose dependents, you wish to assign to the account. Depending on how many will determine how many kind of drops into that sign up process. And you can use, obviously, because we're capturing the dependents, or sorry, the primaries details first, that will pre-populate. You can choose to pre-populate then the child's details, like use same address, same contact details, same email address, blah, 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 blah. With obviously then there's a few fields that they'll change, like name, date of birth, things like that. The way we've set it up is that communication preferences are not shown or given to any child, whether that's the child as part of the family account, or if in ours, our legal have allowed us to do 8+ can sign up as an individual on ours, but there's a couple of changes. The system recognizes if the individual is between 8 and 18, we remove all marketing preferences. They can't, they're just they're just removed from that sign up journey because we can't do any marketing to them. And we've also added an extra pop-up box around trying to explain in layman's terms what we do with their data in terms of to facilitate bookings and activities. That also appears for a child. So in terms of how we're doing it is for the sign up process, that's how we've addressed it in terms of somebody being able to set up a primary with dependents account. Each of them will have their own unique identifier membership code that the primary account holder can choose. So if you can choose who you're making the booking for, or when you access your card, it'll show who's the card for. And I can't think of anything else. Nick or Nish, have I missed anything else in terms of the sign up process of how we've?
I don't think it's in terms of the sign up process.
Yeah.
Yeah, bookings on behalf of those that are linked to your account, and then I guess
Yes.
the ability for those people to be able to, those juniors in this case, or minors, to be able to walk in and pay for their swimming at the front desk, I think was an important part of Interactive.
Yeah, so obviously that was one of the issues that we got hit with there about a month ago, is that because the way we've established our family accounts, you can use the same email address as the primary account holder. We then couldn't push those child records into Legend because they wouldn't accept any records with the same email address, which then meant that because we couldn't create the record in Legend, that child couldn't walk into one of our sites and be recognized and attend free swimming on the holidays. So that was an issue that we are addressing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but I don't think I am, with Flow, because they're going to be able to accept multiple email addresses. So we will overcome that issue with the child associated to a family account being recognized in a site and being able to go in and book an activity on site. Any other, is that?
Can I ask a clarification question?
Yeah, as if to
yeah.
me?
yeah, just to understand. Is the 8 to 18 situation, can they then have a family account if they're between 8 and 18?
No. Sorry, they can have an individual account. They can't attribute anybody else, so it's only for an individual. This came up in discussion from some of my colleagues, because we obviously run quite a large number of holiday provision, where 13, 14-year-olds turn up at the activities and fill out registration forms and take part. And we discussed with legal around the around the issue of, if we set the accounts that individuals have to be 18+ to sign up, it's a barrier to a lot of our young people in Manchester who maybe don't have a responsible adult that can complete that sign up process for them. And we got the GDPR expert involved from Manchester City Council, and because of the way our system is set up in terms of we don't do like targeted advertising, there was like a list of things they deemed that it was suitable for us to be able to do the 8+. There's something under 8 within GDPR rules. I think it's 7 and under. I mean, because I'm not an expert in it, but this is what they've signed off on whenever I went through with them.
That's good. And so, sorry, one further question. That's really great. Does that mean then that you're capturing details of the parents for the guardians for those 8 to 18-year-olds, or is that information not captured?
No, they have to insert an emergency contact detail, name and telephone number for an emergency contact.
Great. So it's the emergency contact that's
Yeah.
and not the parent.
No, it doesn't have to be the parent. It can be, as long as it's an emergency contact detail is what's being captured for them. And we just had to make those changes around the marketing preferences being removed and the ability to store any financial details being removed, and the pop-up box to try and make it easier for a young person to understand what you're doing with their data without having to go into a privacy notice and scan it. So just kind of draw out the high level bits.
That's great. And my next question there, Tim, was going to be to Andy about whether, because that's different to what Debbie was describing last week, but I didn't know if there's any more on further questions for Anne-Marie before I asked that.
Debbie can't make it today, unfortunately. She's got another meeting on along with David, so they can't be here. I just write some notes up here at the minute. Is there any documentation at all, Anne-Marie, that captures all this that could be shared? So we, rather than not scribing notes, but something we can present to Debbie and to everyone active, so that they're clear with regards to what the requirement is here for MCR.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not sure of what the request is. Sorry.
So I might be able to help out here. So
Yeah.
I think part of the discussion today is about getting to the point of agreeing what the requirements for this dependent account setup might be. That sounds like it might well be that, well, it definitely is the case that David and Debbie will probably have thoughts on that. So obviously there'll be a, well, I don't know what write-up there'll be from today's call, but there's not, I know that MCR are kind of working and with that as a standards-based approach for MCR. It's got to obviously meet MCR's requirements. It's also got to meet Everyone Active's requirements. So I don't know if we've got something on the MCR side that's as unless I don't think there's a document that includes this specifically yet, but I guess there would be from a standards perspective after this discussion. So this is kind of creating that.
So the bit I would possibly, and I'm not a GDPR expert, so but my understanding was that only children over the age of 13 can provide their consent. Obviously that's in terms of marketing, which you've already stated. That's fine because you're not marketing to them. My concern though is the booking through the GLL or EA site, their terms and conditions, those terms and conditions may be different, and therefore are we going to get blurred lines on where consent actually sits if that person is under 13 but making a booking?
Why would there be a blurred line? Sorry, is that in terms of organisation?
So
consent?
they can go through the first step through the MCR part, but the terms and conditions are different potentially on the EA side, because they're saying that anyone under the age of 13 needs a parental consent to be able to make a booking.
Yeah, understood. That so to put that in another way, it might be that you're only allowed to link an account if you're over 13, but you can create an account in MCR. So you're only allowed to create an account in Everyone Active if you're over 13, but you can create an account if you're over 8 for MCR. So we need to.
But Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure it's over 8 in the leisure centres to create individual accounts.
No, it doesn't work that way, because we get adults creating accounts on behalf of their kids because of the way that this email address problem that we have. So you get junior accounts set up for kids who are quite young, so that adults can book on their behalf. So the kids actually don't own the account, even though it's made up in their name. This is the problem that we're managing currently and have for years and years and years.
So just so I'm clear, so if a young person walks into a leisure centre, they have to be 13 plus to create their own account?
No, they don't. No, 10, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds.
That was my thing. So
At Everyone Active, as I understand it, is that if they want to be on the system, they've got to have a consenting adult, and I think they have to be 13 upwards from a marketing perspective. For an online account.
Yeah, but we don't market to anybody under the age of 18. So we exactly the same as Anne-Marie said. We automatically don't market to them.
So from a DLL perspective, there's no issue here, Nick, in terms of you wouldn't have to change it to that 13.
Right. Sure, but in the Everyone Active's case, it sounds like there might be in terms of that discrepancy between when.
Yeah, and there might not be on that, Nick. It's just obviously something that yeah, within our system that is there, and it's just whether they're using that or not.
So there's almost a minimum age that we need to surface somewhere for this link account to work. It sounds like, as in if the user is not of a certain age, then we shouldn't be offering them to create a customer account.
Yeah, we need to verify that certainly with Everyone Active. I think it is 18 in their environment.
Cool. Okay. Obviously, because that's only on creation that would matter, because you're linking accounts actually that already exist. I suppose it doesn't.
Correct. Yeah.
So the capture of consent, capture of the parent information, which it sounds like is being captured as an emergency contact. I know that Debbie previously mentioned that they require the guardian's information. Is an emergency contact sufficient? Do you know, Andy or Andrew, from a kind of system perspective, to create an account for someone who's under 18?
Need to check with Everyone Active on that, but I mean, again, it probably could be just a bare minimum of the fact that they've got an address and basic contact details.
Yeah, I mean, the way we've got it configured mostly in our system is the fact that you can say that you just need an adult's name placed against it. So
right, so just like a string is sufficient. Oh dear. Sorry, I appear to have frozen.
Yeah, so it's something also to recognise that emergency contact might be required for this this kind of setup. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, that was the end of my questions on the 8 to 18. So 8 to 18 summarise can create an account in the broker side. However, they might not be able to create an account on the booking system side. The emergency contact must be captured so that can be passed through in all cases, it sounds like. And generally, consent for GDPR isn't captured, although that's currently proposed to be done at the booking system anyway. But as a side note, GDPR is not captured. Is that right?
And so I think I missed a point of detail. My internet dropped for a moment. Sorry. So on some systems, on some booking systems, is it the case that a guardian needs to give their consent for a young person to sign up, or is it simply the case that their details need to be recorded?
So the way we built our system is that only children of 13 or over are able to provide consent to be able to use the online booking system. Now, again, as I mentioned, I'm not a GDPR expert, so I don't know the exact details around that, but that was what we built in as protection for our operators.
And sorry, I'm quite naive. Is GDPR the only relevant legislation here? That is there not a sort of broader issue with contracts, for instance, or safeguarding that restricts this kind of activity?
From our perspective, it was the GDPR-led discussion that formulated how we would approach it. And I think the issue is, like Andrew says, even the experts aren't even experts in it, because a lot of GDPR is around how you interpret it. Yeah. And initially at the start of this project, we were looking at 13, but actually whenever I got into the discussions with our legal team, 13 is the number that's thrown around a lot of the times because of around marketing and depend on a lot of online sites in terms of how they're set up with gamification and entrapment of young people is where that age, I think, seems to come in. And there was then this other age of 7 and below. If your site doesn't hit those kind of parameters, which is after showing them what ours did, they said that ours would fall within that, which is why we were able to drop it down, which from our perspective was a better thing for us to do.
Okay. Okay, I'm surprised, I guess is all I can say. But so an 8-year-old could sign up for an MCR active account and then make a booking as a guest of another account.
No. Huh?
Okay.
No. So,
Okay.
but sorry, they can make it. What do you mean, like a get and like a book, like make a booking into like JLL? Do you mean?
Well, this is what I'm trying to understand. What is the value of somebody of that age having an MCR active account? What can they then do
Because,
with
well,
that?
I suppose, remember, our scheme's broader than just the leisure centres. So we have a huge community offer, and all of them offers are going to be online and bookable. So all our holiday provision will be where you have to book your activity. So what we didn't want was a 10-year-old who has been attending those activities all this year. And then because they don't have a responsible mum and dad or parent that can sign, they can create their own with the help of any adult or themselves, because kids are now quite tech savvy, to be honest, and book, because it's free as well. So they might never have a card, but a lot of our activities will be free.
Mhm.
Or reserve your place and pay £1 at the door, you know, so it's a mixed model for us. So they may never book an activity where a card details are required, but that wouldn't be a barrier to them accessing all the free provision that will be bookable through our system.
Okay, right. So payment would be offline if present at all. Okay. But sorry, so what I'm unclear on, and I might have just missed this, is so say a 10-year-old can't have they can't have an account on the booking system side. That's correct, right?
For Gladstone, not for
Gladstone, right.
for potentially everyone active in Gladstone system, but GLL don't have that restriction.
Right.
So you can have the account in our system, but it needs to have, if it's under 13, an adult has given consent for them to be able to use their system.
Oh, that's interesting. So actually that could be solved by something on the create page that the booking system controls, just a tick box saying, you know, an adult has given consent. Is that sufficient, or?
Well, you need to have the actual record linked at that time, and it would need to exist, as I understand it, in the seller system as well, as a point of reference.
So the actual adult record needs to exist.
Correct.
So not just any adult can give consent. It has to be an adult. How is this adult recorded in the system? Is this an adult member, or is this just an adult record?
It's an adult record held within the actual system itself.
Right. Okay.
But I would think with everyone active as part of the terms and conditions, it couldn't just be a random adult. It would need to be an adult of association of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't create a duplicate. Ideally, we wouldn't create a duplicate record there.
Well, the duplicate checks would need to come in at that point, see if the record already exists with their details and that email address and so on.
Yes.
But it sounds like from what Anne-Marie's explaining, that's why I was asking whether there was a document that explained the process from Manchester's perspective with regards to the flow, because again, we're still not seeing any form of UI at the moment to understand at what point it then comes over to the booking system. But just the understanding of, it sounds like it's being entered in at the MCR level, so there's an association there. I'm assuming that then that can be passed through at the point of the record creation, the primary as well as the child.
Well, this is a really good. That's a really good segue, actually. I don't know if or to something that I was about to say. I don't know if Tim. I've just drawn something. Would you be possibly able to share this? I've just put it in the chat to try and help us with understanding the different bits and bobs that are going on here.
Sorry, is everyone seeing this?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I think if I've understood what's going on here, you've got this situation, and there are different approaches, different modes, and there's one more which everyone active is which Gladstone just mentioned. So there's a situation, as Anne-Marie alluded to, where you've got an individual, which is the child, and there's an emergency contact that individual has as well. I'll just put that in. And that's the so plus emergency contact for minors. So there's one mode you can create an account as an individual. There's another mode you can create an account, and this is what I was going to talk about, groups versus primary dependents. But there's another mode you can create an account where you've got one adult, say, has lots of kids or dependents. I guess they don't have to be children necessarily, and therefore you've got that guardian relationship between them. So the adult's obviously the one that ticks all the boxes from that perspective. And then I suppose the other problem we've got is the so that all works. The question is,
I'm failing to understand what the difference is between this emergency contact for minors to the primary dependents, because there still could be a one-to-many there.
Well, so the challenge here is emergency contact is just a name, whereas I think what we're saying is that there's a situation in the Gladstone system where you actually need it effectively another account in the system linked to the individual to create that account if they're under 13, as I'm trying to illustrate with this little guy here.
Okay. I didn't appreciate that the emergency contact. So what you're saying there is the details are held in MCR or Westminster, let's say, as an example. Look at the global picture.
Yeah.
Specifically Manchester at the minute. So that the details are held there, but they're not shared to the seller. Is that what we're saying? Well,
so currently the emergency contact details are shared at the point of creating the account. But the problem
that's still the issue we've got here as well. If they choose to share the details. Because under GDPR, they can opt out and then just go through as a guest. That's
okay. That's a good separate problem. Yes, guest. We definitely talk about guests. Yes, but just as in terms of creating accounts, on that point, the emergency contact details, if shared as part of creating an account, that's not sufficient. It sounds like from Gladstone's perspective, because you actually need to have a proper bona fide, name, address, date of birth, everything. Person to link them to. You can't.
There would be minimal field requirements as part of the record creation. Yes,
for this person. So I think we talked about earlier, just having a name and a contact phone number for the emergency contact. That is not sufficient then for Gladstone. It sounds like, to create that minor, or is it?
Well, the system. Well, if you're adding a record to the system, that in itself, outside of what the mandatory fields may be for everyone active, wouldn't be sufficient.
Yeah, and obviously we don't want to duplicate it, so there's that problem. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, the minimum details is not a Gladstone requirement. That is an everyone active configuration requirement. There's a standard there. When they add a record to the system, there are minimum requirements, minimum mandatory fields, optional fields. There's no scheme or no motive as such that, for emergency contact, as an example, the bare minimum is a last name and first name.
Yeah,
it's a one rule, and that's governed by the policies of everyone active in this instance.
Yeah,
and what are the verification rules for that as well? I mean, how does that? Sorry, that's a bad way to ask the question. How are those fields provided? Is the expectation that somebody shows up at the Everyone Active desk and says, I am person X over the age of 18. I am the legal warden guardian of this child?
Is that aimed towards Manchester?
Well, I suppose anybody. I was actually thinking of Everyone Active there. How would Everyone Active normally anticipate that this data would be captured?
Well, whatever's passed from the broker. It's what's being passed through.
Right. So there's no procedural rule in place about verification checks.
Well, there will be once details are actually passed through. When the details are passed through from the broker, then they would be verified to see if those details exist. But the initial details at the moment are being held within the broker. And it's down to the broker through their website, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, but they would then pass those details through the OpenActive APIs as such.
Yeah,
part of the creation process.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. Yeah.
Sorry, when I said verification, I didn't mean verification in the sense of aligning two different accounts. I meant verifying that the person who's providing the information about their name, address, and relationship to the minor.
I
is
would have
that
said,
person.
because I would have said if the broker's capturing those details in the first instance, I might be wrong here, but that would be the onus on the broker. We'll have no influence there. Everyone active will have an influence there, because that's all been done through the broker's portal, I believe.
Yeah, I think that sounds consistent. I mean, certainly that's how all the other details are being captured. The broker already captures them for its own purposes, and then it's consent given within the broker to pass those on if needed. I mean, that might be what you're talking about, Tim. That consent question. It's with explicit consent the broker shares the details.
Sorry, sorry, I feel like I'm in a different and possibly irrelevant universe with all of this. I'm assuming a world in which assertions of legal guardianship need to be checked, that the relationship between the minor and the adult is as asserted in the real world. So is there a check anywhere in the process about the relationship and about the kind of identification and documentation requirements that need to be submitted in order to assert that such and such person stands in that relationship to the minor?
No, I think the answer is no. Because are you just asking like what happens today in a leisure centre when a child's record is, or an individual record is created for a minor? Because I know I've set my kids up and I didn't have to prove that I was their mother.
Right, okay, so it's
and
just...
I'm sure if a 13-year-old goes in and says that's I'll put my dad's contact details, no one's checking. Or when they tick and say, yeah, my dad said it was okay, no one's actually checking those. You're asking the question.
Right, okay, yeah, that answers what I was trying to get to. Yeah,
yeah.
nobody's checking any of that. Okay. Right, so does this get handled basically in the same way that any sort of required field gets handled right now, as a sort of out of band agreement, that if you wanted to set up a membership via the broker and there were required fields on the system end, the booking system end, the specification doesn't actually assert required fields. It's just something that has to be arranged between broker and system.
So presently, I mean, there isn't any mechanism right now to handle the required field side of this. So yeah, that's exactly right. It would be out of band.
Right. Okay.
And I'm not sure whether, yeah, this minimum thing is new. The idea that we might have an inconsistency between the ages that are permitted in different systems. Mm-hmm. So whether that's also out of band or whether we can code that somehow is I guess a question, and also whether we need to. Yeah, is there like an age where emergency contact details are required that's useful to surface, if that varies as well, rather than that being out of band, because that might be per system. So yeah, there's two questions there, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah.
Is insurance an issue here as well, potentially, if you've got a 10-year-old who's booked onto a session where a parent or an adult needs to be with him, but he's booked onto it and turns up on his own? It's not such a great end user experience. I don't know if that's kind of already taken care of on the seller's perspective.
I lost.
It's come very quiet.
Yeah, is the silence don't know,
don't
care?
But is insurance involved? Does anyone have, I suppose, is it something that is actually on anyone's radar? If it's not, then I guess it may not be relevant. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, I'd use case. It might be a terrible example, but for instance, a 10-year-old books himself a session at a gym, but to be within the gym, he needs to be with somebody over the age of 18 years to be insured, but he turns up on his own at 10 o'clock and then gets refused. It's not a great user experience. I'm just trying to see if we've got that user case covered.
That user case will be covered in our system because they will be permitted to purchase that activity in the first place because they're underage. So there's age restrictions on activities they can't do. Anything else they're allowed to do, there's no age restriction on.
Yeah, we have got with there. Yeah, there's that's true. There's provision in the spec already for restrictions on age-based or otherwise in the activity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, just checking.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Can I ask a question about primary dependents versus groups then? If we're out of the, it seems like we've concluded things on the individual problem. is basically there seems to be two routes to doing this kind of group account, if you like. The people in black here represent the ones that have the kind of authority to make bookings, and the clear ones are the ones which are just dependents, so they don't have the authority to make bookings themselves, they just exist. So my understanding is, and this is what I'm kind of seeking clarity on, whether these two models are accurate, or if there's more going on here. In a very basic sense, the primary dependent model is there is one person with authority to make bookings, and they have lots of kids or dependents. I mean, there could be other types of people, I guess. And then the group account is where you've got one or more people who can be a bit like in a WhatsApp group, the admins of a WhatsApp group, or whatever other analogy we would want to use. So in a group account, you've got two parents, and both of them can log on individually and make bookings on behalf of the others in the group. And you might have more admins, more people with authority to make bookings. So it doesn't have to be just two; it could be lots. And maybe everyone in the group can make bookings for each other, for example. So I mean, are these two models? It sounds. I mean, do these resonate in terms of what people have got in terms of their own booking systems right now? For example, in Gladstone, if you have a child account registered, can you make bookings for them on their behalf?
It's not currently available at the moment. It's very close to coming to general release, but it's not there right now.
Excellent. Okay. Well, so the feature that's not quite yet ready, is that the one? Does it follow the middle model where it's only one parent and that has the children accounts, or is it the kind of right-hand side model where multiple parents can have the accounts?
It can. I need to check, but I think it provides both. It's whether, but the struggle that I've got here is that we only deem it as a primary member. You may have two adults, but there's only one primary. Everybody else will what we would class as a linked account. I need to check on how that works.
I think you can set it per member, Andy, per person. Yeah,
you might be able to.
So I know that it's the one on the right.
Yeah, but then again, Debbie has stipulated is that I think at this moment in time, the way that we're looking to support that is the parent can actually log in as that child at the moment and make the bookings on their behalf using their account.
Parent logged in as a child for the scope of, are we talking about MCR, or are we talking about more generally?
Well, in the current offering at the moment, they can log in as the child through their booking portal and make the, not MCRs, but EA's booking environment, they can book in as the child and make the booking.
But when this feature is released, they'll be able to do more than that, is the idea.
Well, at the moment, we don't have the capability as it stands to be able to book a primary to book on behalf of somebody else. At the moment, they would need to sign it as the actual child themselves.
Yeah, understood. I think so. Well, I don't know when in terms of phasing this additional piece, dependent accounts piece, it might be that this comes after the rest of the membership work in terms of implementation, because it sounds like it's a new feature that most booking systems haven't yet built, but either have built it or are thinking about building it, or have yet in some form of early release. So it doesn't sound like across Legend, Flow, and Gladstone we've got this yet, but it is maybe in all of them to an extent.
Nick, if I can just comment on the groups circle, because the way we see it is that anybody within the group will be able to book independently, because they're not dependents of a primary, and the difference being that a primary generally will be financially responsible for the dependents in terms of paying for the memberships or paying for the bookings. So a dependent in the primary circle can still make independent bookings, but the difference is that the primary's got to know the dependents made the booking. Whereas in the group, anybody can make a booking, everybody's acting independently, but they're within a group because they decided to be in a group for whatever reason, because there might be an association or a club, or there could be a, group of teenagers who are booking independently but want to keep tabs on their own activities so they can socially mix and do all sorts of things.
So sorry, Stephen, to be clear, we're saying that the primary, everyone can make a booking in both cases.
Yeah.
and that the I don't know what we're calling. There's a person who's financially responsible, basically.
Yeah, in the middle one, that predominantly will be the primary in this, because the primary will be paying for all the dependents.
And with the right hand side one, how does that work? Is one of the top two allocated as financially responsible, or is it they both are?
No, not necessarily. No. Because we could have two cohabiting adults who actually are primary dependents, and that I mean the terminology may change for that particular scenario, but you could have literally just two cohabiting people, and one pays for the other, in which case you've got a primary dependent. But it's not a junior dependent, so therefore they can act independently of the primary for bookings and all sorts of things.
I see. So for clarity, we're talking about a scenario like this, where you've got,
you know, when we did the wall, when we picked, so I agree,
and they both are adults, they can both book on behalf of each other.
Yeah, they can book for each other. They can book independently.
So what's the difference between in the two different coloured blobs in this case? Is there a difference, or are they all just lots of the same colour?
No, there's a difference, because in the primary and dependent scenario here, the primary can set up the dependents. A dependent can set up independently, then ask to be part of the group, the primary dependent relationship. So you can opt into that, in which case then you're then part of that primary dependency circle. So there's different scenarios that can be planned out, but it's we're using primary dependency terminology, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're either a financial dependent. Well, financial dependent, yes, we're saying, but not necessarily dependent as in that somebody looks after you. Parental responsibility, because it wouldn't be in two cohabiting adults.
Yes.
And you could argue they would be in a group, but we're defining a group as people who are paying independently.
I think I'm following. So is it just about whether people can, in the primary dependence case here, can this child log in and book using the credit card of the parent?
Have we got the location right?
Yeah, they can. If there's a card logged in for that account, then a junior, a dependent, can actually book for that book using that payment method.
Okay, and in this case, they can
because the notification goes to the primary anyway.
Right, and in this case, which is the primary? Sorry, here is one of them the primary.
The one in the black, yeah.
Sorry, in the bottom case. Sorry.
Oh, so in the bottom case. So yeah. So I missed the example then. Beg your pardon.
Oh, in the bottom case of two cohabiting adults, who's the primary?
Yeah. Well, the one who's paying.
So they could both be the primary. Does the group allow them to both be primary? Or is it
if they're both primary, they're in the group, then aren't they? It's a group like you got on the right hand side.
I see.
Just only two of them in it.
Yeah. I'm not quite following the key difference, but maybe I'm being a bit slow here.
All right, can I just, we've only got 10 minutes or 12 minutes left on the call. And I think we're kind of getting a little bit into internals here. I was wondering, would it be possible to defer this conversation until the technical working group tomorrow? Sorry to break up the flow, but I feel like we're getting into details of GLL account management.
Oh, I see. Sorry. No, the reason I was asking the questions was less about understanding GLL and more about if this generic approach from a business perspective, just a business requirements perspective, captures everyone's requirements. And it sounded like it did, but it sounded like it might not quite. But yeah, happy to pick it up. That was where I was going with this. Wasn't to the real technical weeds, if you see what I mean. It was more my next question was going to be, if these two approaches, it sounds like it's all actually the same. We're all talking about the one on the right. Does that then therefore work for Gladstone as well, in terms of the way that was working? Do you see what I mean? And then therefore the requirements are that, well, the right hand one.
Right. Okay. I guess there's now an ambiguity about whether to pursue that. I think if we could leave that for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just because I want to make sure that we've got all the requirements flushed out.
Cool.
So I guess the first question I've got actually is we've been talking about dependent accounts in terms of children. And it actually seems that the assumption is that actually most children can operate quite independently, that we're expecting certainly 13 and up, but sometimes 8 and up to be essentially acting as independent agents. Are there any further requirements or restrictions if we think about dependence in terms of, say, somebody with dementia or somebody with a learning disability or something like that? Because I feel like this must enter into MCR Active's target audience to some extent. Is that correct, Anne-Marie? Is this a concern that's worth addressing?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I think that's I think that we haven't actually, in fairness, given it huge amount of thought. I think the reason that we got ability to link another adult to your account was for that purposes, because you can obviously then make bookings through that one account on behalf of the other adult. But we haven't gone into any then detail around. We've not addressed that in the respect of the flow. So like I said earlier, when the adults invited, they obviously have to assign their own preferences and things. So we've not taken vulnerable adults into consideration at this stage. And I don't know if that could maybe be solved as easily as you add a child and the terminology could be changed to be or vulnerable adult as an option. And so the same parameters apply to that individual. I don't know. We've not actually considered it in huge amounts of details.
Okay. So there's not sort of new requirements that have been canvassed for that. Okay.
No, and I kind of think the requirements that will be put in place to facilitate a child would be then easily transferable over to a vulnerable adult situation.
Okay. So I think the other concern I've got is, and this might be answerable with a single word by Nish, or by Nick, in fact. To what extent are the MCR Active requirements the same as the Active Westminster requirements? Are there any differences worth noting?
None so far in what we've discussed.
Okay. Okay, never mind. Forget my interruption then. I just wanted to make sure we had that covered off. So sorry about that. Then I'll say, Nick, feel free to resume the group's conversation if that's a useful thing to do. I just wanted to make sure that.
Oh yeah, no, of course, no problem at all. Well, I guess it sounds like what we're saying is that the person with the card on, it sounds like the difference between the black and the white, or the see-through blobs here, is that the ones that are black can make a booking. Have a credit card on file that can be used to make a booking, and then anyone in the group can book using anyone's card that's on file in the group. Have I understood that, Stephen, in terms of the way that works?
Correct.
Okay, understood. So basically the difference in color is whether they've got a credit card on the system, and nothing to do with age necessarily, although obviously kids won't have credit cards necessarily. I suppose they might if they're 16 and have a debit card. So does that work then from Gladstone's perspective in terms of where the feature is at the moment? Can anyone in the group book for anyone else? Are we really saying that the right hand side is the winning combination here, and that covers all use cases?
Well, that's where everyone active would like to be once the feature's in place, but it's not there at the moment, and it won't be this side of the new year at the moment.
Sure, understood.
But I think what I need to do is clarify with Debbie and possibly EA to pick this up with MCR, just to get some clarity with regards to what is going to be the current offering at the moment through the Everyone Active integration.
Yeah, it sounds like this. If there was a phase 1, phase 2 conversation, that this might be a phase 2 thing if it needs.
Yeah, I'm sure Debbie mentioned on the last technical call, or not the last technical, maybe one before, that it was more in line with the fact that the parent would probably sign in as the junior to make the bookings and pay for the bookings, because sure. then that child is then within the booking system for when they turn up for that particular activity or class or course.
Yeah. Yeah, understood. Well, so that sounds like a good conversation to pick up. Just back on the kind of just double checking that we've got this completely correct in terms of what we're saying here. So in all cases, everyone can book for everyone. Certain people have cards that can be used to make bookings, and if you make a booking, you get the people. If you're a minor, if you're one of the dependent ones, and you make a booking, the emails come to you, presumably, do they? If you've made that booking, it's the person that makes the booking that gets the emails. Is that?
Well, I'll see you
Not
there.
if you're dependent and making a booking using your primary's card that's registered on that account.
So the card holder gets the book, gets the emails.
Yeah.
Is how it works there. Is that the same for Glasgow?
That's what we're planning.
Well, again, I thought the whole communication piece was being done by MCR. The broker was handling with all forms of communication.
Sorry, it is. This is just understanding the communication. I mean, I'm presuming that the primary form of communication right now within the booking system is email. So what is the expectation around communications that happen?
It depends what email address is held behind the individual. I need to check with everyone what their actual working practices are in that instance. But when it comes to email communication, it will be whatever's held on that particular record, because it's not marketing, it's a service. So in that instance there, as I understand it, an individual making a booking can receive an email, mine or not, because it's confirmation of a service being had.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so there's a question there about whether that's the case. I guess what I was getting to there is, from an OpenActive standards perspective, we might classify the person making the booking as the customer, and then the attendees being different people. So it might be that if the dependent makes the booking, that the customer, the booker, if you like, is still the adult with the card. We would say, and then, do you see what I mean? And that way it fits with the way that everything else currently works. So it sounds like that's what we're saying GLL does, but we need to get clarity on OpenActive's approach.
And sorry, just from my own understanding, so in the dependent account on the broker links to the booking system account, it will link directly through to the dependent record. It actually gets linked there.
Dependent account on the broker.
Yes, you've got a child, you've got the broker account logged in as the child.
Yeah.
Then there's authentication to the booking system. What does the child see? What account gets linked?
So if they're a child and they're under, oh yeah, okay, I see. Well, I think there's two separate issues here. There's how do you manage the group, and then once you've done the group management to figure out if you're in the group and who else is in the group, then when you're making the booking, you've then got to figure out presumably how you're going to pay for the booking, and that's a different thing we need to think about, I suppose.
Yeah.
Card holder, and because obviously now we're saying that they can pay on each other's behalf. So that's new bit of thing to think about.
Yeah, I think I need to think a little bit about what venue this conversation continues in then. I think it's probably a technical discussion rather than a requirements discussion.
Yeah, we've probably got enough now to get. I mean, that we basically have it seems like we've agreed that this is the model that we want to go for on the right hand side. It covers all the other eventualities we've discussed. Seems like it broadly fits with what people have all already doing. So yeah.
Okay, let's pick this up tomorrow then briefly, and then look at the other items on the agenda already noted. And with 1 minute left on the call, is there any other business anybody wants to raise?
I think my worry would be, based on these scenarios, as brokers grow, MCR Active has obviously done all of the safeguarding checks on the activity providers that are feeding into their activity list. So it's just how we handle that moving outside of this particular call, I guess. Really, all of the guys work with Massive Leisure Centre, so they have safeguarding fairly nailed down. It's when you've got a small coach operating and he's being pulled through by a further broker, has that check been done, or how are we going to go about that check? Do you know?
Yeah, and I think there's two questions there. I think one of them is how that information is displayed, which MCR Active has got interesting patterns to answer. I think then there's I guess a requirements question about what the interaction is expected to be between children attempting to book onto unsafeguarded or courses for which safeguarding checks have not been done. I think right now, actually, there are no expectations that that's not a relevant distinction in the requirements. But that's something that we should look at in a more prolonged fashion, I think, on a subsequent call.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for noting that concern. I think the call of December 8th, the December 8th W3C call is going to be addressing a variety of topics, and I think that will probably make it onto the agenda.
Yeah, I think one for tomorrow as well, Tim, is that whilst we're talking about payment and details being held, maybe that's one for tomorrow, but again, our understanding is that those details are all held within the broker, because it's the broker that's got the relationship with the actual payment provider.
So where does payment live? Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's a strange one, because the situation here we're talking about is the main difference between the two colors is based on payment, and payment doesn't actually fall in scope. So I don't know. It's a good question, isn't it?
Because at the end of it, is that what you've got are details being passed from the broker to the booking system or in the database as such. That's just the linking between the broker and the seller. But then, as you say, the payments and all those sorts of things are all held and stored within the actual broker site. And I'm not sure even in that instance there's an influence from the actual seller, apart from a discussion that goes between the seller and the broker with regards to what, in essence, is in scope, out of scope, as per the business models of each organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, Andy. I think it sounds like it might be one of those things that we actually don't need to worry about, because they kind of just, the broker figures it out in terms of.
Well, it's important that we know, because then we know what's in scope, out of scope, and then what we're trying to achieve.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest challenges I think we've got here at the moment.
Yeah. Let's. I think this is worth picking up tomorrow as well. It might bubble back up to the main W3C call, but let's pick it up tomorrow and see how far we get.
Sounds good. Cool.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Much all. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.